Welcome back, everyone, to the Legacy Years podcast, where we always try to talk about all things related to aging. And sometimes we have fun topics and sometimes we have serious topics. And today's topic may be a little bit more on the serious side, but it is something that I feel like is a really relevant issue to today's aging adult. I've even seen it in myself. And so I'm very excited to have today Zach Molock, and we are going to talk about anxiety. Zach,
Yes,
welcome to the podcast. If you'll just tell folks a little bit about yourself.
sure. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak on this topic. It's very near and dear to my heart, as is just mental health as a whole. And I got my start several years back as a public speaker, just from my past experiences dealing with mental health, mainly depression and anxiety. And I have since started a podcast called Who We Are, a mental health podcast, and it gives all of us a platform to share our stories in hopes that it will benefit others and helping them to not feel alone, because that can sometimes
Yeah.
happen with mental illness. And it's been a blessing to myself and to so many.
Well, I was super excited when you came and spoke to our group, and because this has been a topic that I have been thinking about. And I was like, I don't really know who can come speak on this topic. And when you came and spoke to our group, I was like, that's the gentleman that I want. So
Well,
thank you
good.
so much.
Yeah,
Uh,
thanks for having me.
so let's kind of just start with a baseline and talk about what are some of the common signs of anxiety in older adults that maybe people often overlook or misdiagnose for other things.
Sure. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that anxiety may be new to older adults. Let's say that they haven't experienced it most of their life, and they get to this stage of life where they're having to make more difficult decisions, or things get
Yeah.
slightly complicated in setting up. Let's just say retirement, for example, or reverse mortgages. Like you name it, there's some things that only happen at that stage of life. Well, like with transition or any change, that brings about quite a bit of anxiety. So maybe not having experienced it earlier in life and dealing with it now, there are a lot of things that may start to present themselves, and you'll actually be surprised to know that it's more physical, that those signs are presenting themselves. Physical as in, aching joints, poor diet, weight gain, headaches, irritation, things like that can really manifest physically. And even your immune system can really tank when anxiety and stress start to present themselves. So it's very important to pay attention to those physical aspects of anxiety as well as the mental aspects of anxiety, which do include worry, especially about things that are completely out of their control or the
Yeah.
future. It could exacerbate too if they've lost their spouse. That could be very scary, I imagine. Matter of fact, I don't know what I would do in that state. So
Yeah.
anxiety can definitely be a symptom of that as well.
Yeah. I remember being 19 years old and losing my grandfather, and we were all together at his bedside. And my grandmother looked at me and she said, "What am I going to do now?" And I
Hmm.
remember that, and it was so long ago, but it stuck with me because it was such despair in her voice. And I know losing a loved one and being a widow, definitely there's a reason there for some anxiety, but it stuck with me all this
Hmm.
time hearing her say that. So
And another thing I'd like to add, I'm so sorry.
yeah, no, go ahead.
Just as far as adding, what accompanies these signs and symptoms of anxiety, I think it's very important to start be proactive as far as taking a self inventory of your health and what's going on, whether that's mental or physical or both. That way you can tend to gauge from one day to the next, or one week to the next, or specifically one event to the next. How are you handling that particular stressor and anxiety? Another telltale that I failed to mention, I'm sorry about that, is the sleep pattern.
Mm,
Sleep is crucial next to staying hydrated. And if there's interruption in the sleep patterns, insomnia, just constant laying awake and worrying, or even chronic napping throughout the day, that's definitely something to pay attention to as well.
yeah. So, you've mentioned, part of the reason that older adults may be experiencing anxiety is as these things are changing. Are there other reasons why we might experience anxiety when we have never dealt with anxiety before, but all of a sudden now we're feeling, and maybe a foreign feeling for some people too?
Mhm. Yes. So at that age, we tend to slow down. The first two phases of life, you're learning who you are, you're slowly figuring things out. And then the second phase, you're, working really hard in your purpose. And then that third phase, you're enjoying the fruit of your labor, so to speak. Well, when things start to slow down, the mind starts to process things. PTSD is one of the most common triggers of anxiety in older adults, because there are some things that maybe had happened when they were younger, or teenagers, 20s, or even 30s, that are starting to surface again. And that can really jolt the person's mentality, because they don't know where that's coming from. It's completely foreign. And then having to figure out why that's being triggered, and where it's coming from, that can be very difficult and cause quite a bit of anxiety. So you're absolutely right to say that it can be very foreign at that age.
Yeah. And I think my generation and my parents' generation, mental health was not talked about. And so, this is the generation that's aging right now. And
Mhm.
so, to talk about this, or to even admit that maybe there's something going on, may be difficult for people.
Well, because it's still stigmatized.
Yeah.
That's my life goal, is to completely eradicate the stigma associated with mental health, and it does present itself greatly in older adults. Because you're right, and I tend to think of my parents and grandparents, and I call them old school. They have the old school train of thought, so to speak, and
Yeah.
it's more of a suck it up, rub some dirt on it. Let's, or or or,
Yeah.
or just ignore it. Just don't pay
Yeah.
attention to it. But that can be extremely dangerous, because, like I said, you've got all these years of whatever happened in your first 50 years of life that could start to present themselves in your 60s, and it's fast. I mean, it's coming like a freight train. And if you're not equipped with which most people, and it's not their fault, our parents, grandparents did the best they could. I cannot imagine what it was like growing up in those times, so I have nothing to relate that to. But I could see maybe why they just thought to suck it up and move on, because they
Yeah.
had to. So, yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of brings me to what I really wanted to ask next, which is what should someone do? What are some things that folks can and should do if they feel like that they might have some anxiety going on?
Well, first and foremost is to talk about it. Regardless of what age we are, and mental health in general, everybody deals with mental health. Every single person deals with mental health on some degree. So, on top of talking about it, one of the first things to learn is that you're not alone. Literally every person is going to experience this on some level. Now, they may not know what to do with it, which I think is what we're talking about here. But
Yeah.
um, talking about it, counseling, uh, being with your friends, community's huge. Isolation can really dampen your lifestyle at that point. Not just it could destroy it, to be honest. Isolation in general is just such a dangerous thing, and that's very different than seclusion. Seclusion is an intentional, healthy way of stepping aside, uh, being mindfully aware of what's going on, who you are, that you are safe. That's seclusion. Isolation is the opposite. That's where you withdraw from just social events. You withdraw from your friends. You withdraw from your family. Uh, but it comes back to being able to talk to somebody that you trust. And if that's not a family member, which I would hope it would be a family member, that it would be a close friend of yours that would not judge. So somebody who's going to be able to listen to you, describe these feelings, and you may not know how to describe them, but somebody who's there to listen and not fix. That's important too.
So let's say when you talk about isolation, because I do talk to a number of clients who don't have friends, a lot of friends, because a lot of their friends have gone on,
Mhm.
or they sometimes don't have children. Maybe they've lost children or they never had children, or they don't have the physical means to get around. And so they spend a lot of time at home. What should someone like that do? What are some thoughts and resources where if someone is feeling that isolation and they're not sure, they don't feel comfortable, or don't have a friend to pick up the phone and call, what's something
Mhm.
that someone like that can do?
Well, what's great about today's day and age and technology is that it's become so user friendly that literally anybody can use it at any age. And what I'm describing is talk therapy either online or over the phone. And you're right, there are some older individuals that have no one left, it seems, but
Yeah.
they always have a lifeline, so to speak. One is 988lifeline.org, or dialing 988, and that's a crisis line, but you can always reach somebody at that particular resource. Again, that's 988lifeline.org or pound 988. And then there are with all insurances, Medicare, whatever insurance you have, you will have some type of mental health uh, access to a counselor. Now, you may have a copay, you may not. It just depends. And the access to that counselor, because you may be thinking, well, how are they going to get out of the house if they're just stuck in the house and immobile? That's the telephone. They do counseling via telephone. I'll just shout out to MD Live right now because I don't have a lot of time to just leave the house, working from home. But I can schedule an appointment for counseling and talk therapy, and 2 days later, I've got somebody on my computer screen or just over the phone, and I'm having a conversation with them. So there's always
Good.
somebody to talk to.
Good. Okay. Well, I had no idea about
Hmm.
pound 988.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
988lifeline.org. It's always there. It's always there, 24/7. It is there for you. And a lot of times people may think too that, well, I'm not in a crisis, Zach, so could I just call them anyway? Yes, you can. If you need somebody to talk to, whether you think it's crisis or not, they are there for you and they're
Well,
willing to help.
I hope people listen and take that advice, because I do think that with the stigma involved, that generation struggles with that. But this is a non-judgment. These people are here to help.
Hmm.
Everybody feels anxiety, whether they admit it or not. And I personally know that as I have aged, that my anxiety has gotten higher. Things that I would have dealt with easily in my 30s and 40s, I'm more struggling with in my 50s. So happens
Hmm.
to everybody.
It does, and and good on you for being able to say that out loud, and recognize that, because that's a big part of not accepting that anxiety or depression is a new identity by any means at all. I definitely don't believe that. I don't say that I have anxiety or I am anxious. I don't use those terms. Now, do I struggle with anxious thoughts? Yes. So there's also power in how you name these things. And with what you just did, you named what it is that you were feeling. Now, whether it's the right name or not, you were able to still articulate that to some degree. And that's very important too, is for people who are not used to these um, experiences, or they've grown up in a life that's been stigmatized, or mental health is stigmatized, just to be able to name these feelings that they're having, to be able to be aware, okay, I'm having this thought, am I safe? That's the number one question to answer. Am I safe? And if you can answer yes to that, then you can say, okay, where am I at? What does this mean to me? Why is this thought? And you see what I mean? You can start naming these things. But if you
Yeah.
talk to yourself out loud and give these things names, you don't take on the identity, but you are addressing the symptoms of the anxiety.
It's funny because you're sitting there saying that, and I'm actually doing this training that's work related training. And one of the things that we've been talking about is the duplication theory. And if you something scares you and you do it enough times, that all of a sudden your brain starts to register, okay, this isn't as scary as I once thought it was.
Mm-hmm.
Or asking yourself out loud, if what is the fear behind this, and then am I safe? is that,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of taking that path and letting that fear lose its power, which
Mm-hmm.
is so funny that that's really a psychological, thing that we can do, whether it's work or whether it's our personal lives. And
Yep.
there is power in what we think and what we say.
What anxiety, it comes from fear. But I want people to know this too, that the fear that you're experiencing and the anxiety that you're experiencing, that's your body doing its job. Your body is alerting you that, hey, something's not right. So rather than compartmentalize or just completely offload that anxiety or fear, exactly what you said, to face it. And the more times we do face it with a compliment to our own body and our own mind, hey, thanks for doing your job. Now let's face this and let's work on it. Let's name it. Let's move forward. You work in tandem with what your body's already doing. And that's what's so great about our creator, is that he created us with that alarm system built in. Anxiety gets a bad rap, and I understand why, because it can lead to some not so pleasant things. But at the same time,
Yeah.
if we can utilize it as the tool that it was meant to be, then we take over the power of it.
Yeah. I really commend my children, and my children are all adult children now. But they're the ones that really opened my mind to the fact that these are things that we should be talking about. And these are things that, you need to be talking about, Mom, because, they'll recognize things in me that I don't even see in myself. And so they, they've been helping their parent in that way. So that kind of transitions me to what can we as loved ones or family members or caregivers help, what can we do to help our older adults if we kind of see them facing something like this? What kind of support can we give?
Sure, I think the first thing is just to let them know that they're seen, and to be present. Family members can be quick to want to fix things, and I get it, because we don't want to see our most precious loved ones uh, hurt. So we
Yeah.
we want to take away whatever it is, whatever's scaring mom, whatever's making dad upset. We just want to take that away. But I think it's very important once we do start, and you have to have a maturity level too. So like you said, we'll use your kids for example. Their maturity level is high if they can definitely see what's going on, and just being able to be present and to grab your hand or put their arm around you and say, "Mom, hey, I'm here for you." That's very powerful. So that's to me number one, being able to be present, without trying to fix it.
Yeah.
Try not to judge. We with our family members, we're so comfortable with our family members. We say things sometimes to our family members that we wouldn't dare say to anyone else, but it's because of that comfort. We know that whatever we say, that family member is still going to love us, but it's very
Right.
important to be aware and considerate of that family member who may be struggling. And it's okay to ask questions. And I would definitely implore that. Ask questions. Hey, Mom, I've noticed lately that you've been up a lot during the night. Or I've noticed that you're constantly rubbing your knees or you're rubbing your head. Like, is everything okay? And just finding different things to name and to ask, and to be considerate. And what that does is that also shows your interest. Any family member who feels as though another family member is interested in them, they're going to talk. They're going to open up to some degree. Now, depending on how old school the person is, it may be a struggle to get them to open
Yeah.
up, but you know them well enough at that point. So just letting them know that you're there for them and that they're not alone, that's powerful in itself.
Yeah. And I think it's different, male to female too, because I know if you know, were to say something to your dad, it might be a little different than,
Hmm.
and received a little different than if you said it to your mom. And that might not be the same in every family, but I do feel like in my family that that's pretty true. Um,
Yes.
so I like the way of saying, are you asking the different questions like, are you up a lot? Or, I've noticed this. And I had no idea about the physical manifestations that you were talking about.
Hmm.
Certainly, I would think sleep, I could understand that one, but achy and but it kind of makes sense if you think about it, because when you are anxious, you do tend to be more tense. Is
Hmm.
that why that causes that?
Yes, it's your body's response. It's a protective response. It's essentially the fight or flight, and so your body is
Yeah.
protecting itself to take care of what it is that's threatening your body. So that's definitely a healthy response. But to stay in that high tense, that high emotional state, that's where it can be really dangerous, especially over long term. And there's a lot of things that contribute to that too. And I'll name just a few. It seems like coffee is, well, every human being's go-to anyway. I love coffee, but the older people in my life, they drink coffee 24/7. Well, whether they're used to it or not, at that point they're drinking it that much, they're definitely used to it, but that's still a stimulant in your body. And that's exacerbating some of these anxious feelings, or it's causing anxiety without you knowing it. Well, the first thing they're going to do is say, oh, I've drank coffee all my life. That's never bothered me. Well, things are a little different now.
Yeah.
Same with foods. There are some foods that as we age, we cannot eat anymore. Dairy and gluten and soy are three big pieces of food that I think that we should honestly eliminate from our diet as we age. And medications too. Medications can exacerbate symptoms of anxiety. So it's good to know what your family members are taking. Not every family member is going to be on board with letting you know what they're taking, and that's
Yeah.
okay. But I think you have a general idea as well. And real quick, you said something too that was really interesting as far as it's different for males and females and how you might
Yeah.
present to your dad or your mom. You you know what they like though. You know what makes them happy, right? So it's brings something to the table, so to speak. Like if dad loves fishing, bring about a topic involved with fishing, or show up with a new lure, or show up with a magazine, something that pulls him in to converse. And same with mom. If she likes to crochet, if she likes to cook, just anything that she may latch onto, bring that a physical object, bring that to the table, and get her to talk about it. You would not believe how that diffuses anxiety if you get somebody uh, talking about what they love and what they're passionate
I love that. And I also feel like being careful to not dismiss what they're saying. And I feel like,
about.
again, I
Yes.
may be stereotyping, but I feel like when I talk to a lot of my female clients who are widows, if they have adult sons, they don't want to bring those concerns because they don't think that, like, their son will be serious about it. I don't know if that's the right word that I'm looking for, but just want, be careful about being dismissive of what your parents are going through.
Hmm. And I think sometimes that's masked though, when 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 it comes off as dismissive. Meaning, like from the example you just gave, I hear that as mom protecting the child and not wanting the child to know that
Mm,
mom's dealing with something like that.
yeah.
Now, in the same regard, the child or family member could be dismissive because they don't know how to respond, right? So I think it's important to be intentional, important to be proactive, have plans in places for things like this, but at the same time, lean into whatever it is. If the child's receiving news from the parent about anxiety or depression, it's okay to lean into that and face that and ask mom why. I know we tend to put our parents and our elders on a pedestal, and I get that they raised us, they taught us everything. But there comes a time where we need to be there for them too, and essentially pay it back.
Yeah. I love that. We do, for sure. We
Hmm.
owe them.
We
Yeah.
really do. They made us who we are.
Yeah. Zach, if somebody is listening today and maybe they're struggling, with anxiety, what would you want them to hear from you?
Number one, that you're not alone. You're 100% not alone. That there are so many, if not everybody, out there dealing with something, especially post-COVID. Let's benchmark that, right?
Yeah.
So here we are in the post-COVID area, where mental health has it's taken on almost a whole new form. I think it's because it's gotten so much more attention because of what COVID did to us. But at the same time, like you got to understand that you're not alone. and that you're going to be okay, and that you do have a life still worth living, whether you hit the age of 40, 50, 60, or 70. There's still plenty of time left for you to enjoy and appreciate and soak in. And spending time just worrying about that next thing, getting anxious about what to do in this situation, it's robbing. It's robbing you of the days that you do have remaining. And I know that that may sound, morbid, so to speak, but there comes a point in our life where we have to recognize where we're at in the life stage that we're in and learn to be grateful. And again, just to know that you're not alone and that you're going to be okay. You are loved by somebody. Going back to that example that you said earlier, what if their friends have passed and the family has passed? There is still someone out there, even if it's a person on the other end of the 988 phone call, that genuinely cares about you and loves you and wants to see you succeed.
I really like that, and I do hope that people listen to that and take some action if they're feeling a certain way. And speaking of We Are Not Alone, Zach, will you tell them about your podcast? Because I think it's such a wonderful thing, and it might benefit someone to be able to go and listen to what you do.
Sure. Yeah. Well, the platform I use is Spotify and iTunes, and the name of the podcast is Who We Are, a mental health podcast by Zach Molock. And what we do is we share stories. I invite guests, typically weekly or not with, every other week. I invite guests to come speak as raw and as authentic as they want to, in hopes that their message, their story is going to benefit someone else and let somebody else know that they're not alone. They're uncensored. Nothing is off limits. And we have heard some gut-wrenching stories, but every story we've heard has had success, not only in the person that's telling the story, but I've gotten feedback from so many people through social media or direct contact, and they're saying, Zach, that lady's story on postpartum depression, or that guy's story on post-war trauma and PTSD, that really got me, and that really helped me through what I was dealing with. We have one that's titled Grief, where a friend of mine, Brian Williford, speaks into grief and how to process grief rather than just compartmentalize it. And that one has blown up off the charts because everybody, to some degree, is dealing with some form of grief. And it's just been such a therapeutic and almost cathartic experience to have people share their stories and to be vulnerable. And I would definitely encourage everyone to listen to it, because there is a piece somewhere in there in that podcast that will resonate with you and you'll be able to relate to, and you'll realize that it's that epiphany of like, oh my gosh, somebody else deals with this too.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just me.
Yeah.
So I think it's great. And again, the people that I have on there to share their stories, they're who makes this podcast what it is. And again, it's to help eliminate and break that stigma, to empower people to talk about their mental health more and to be proud of who they are.
That's wonderful. I love that so much. And I really do think that that is a ministry in and of itself. And I'm glad that you're doing it. And I hope that folks go listen, and I hope they find something that can help them.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Zach, for being on today. I appreciate you.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.